Welcome, I'm Denise Graves, and you're watching Opera America's Oral History Project.
Well, it is wonderful to be here with you. And Carol Vaness, thank you. You may know that our 50th anniversary at Opera America was in 2020, which was interrupted a bit by COVID. One of the projects that we wanted to do for our anniversary was to capture interviews with at least 50 people who had really made an indelible impression on American opera. And you are one of them. And I'm just so grateful to you for taking the time today to
Oh,
speak to me.
yeah. Oh, thank you for asking me. I'm honored to be considered in the top 50 of people who have at least made, a footprint.
Yeah, you really have, at such a pivotal moment, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, as American artists really began to populate the major stages around the world. And you are just, such an important member of that cohort of great American singers. Um, I always start off my interviews, though, by asking, who brought you to your first opera?
Oh, okay. My first opera, I was in undergrad, and I had been a piano and English double major, but the choir director was a very cute guy, and I really loved to sing in choirs. And he invited me to take voice lessons. So I started voice lessons with this guy. And I was really there because he was cute.
Hmm.
I had voice lessons, and he took me and my girlfriend, we were both in the choir, to see Beverly Sills sing Manon, which was then my first opera. It
Wow,
was when the New York City Opera came to Los Angeles,
sure.
and so I saw her do that. And then then he took us the next night to Don Giovanni, where
Okay.
I believe it was, I think Marilyn Niska, I'm going to say, is Donna Anna.
Hmm.
I can't remember the rest of the cast. Besides Beverly, I think it was Hank Price
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the Manon, probably.
probably.
And but of course, I sat and I thought, well, this is nice. Lots of costumes, and I liked the aria about the table.
Hmm.
So when I left, to me, the aria was beautiful. I couldn't figure out when the arias started, or I didn't really know that much about opera. Don Giovanni made more sense to me in a structured way, and I, of course, understood the story. But after the first act, my teacher and I was studying as a mezzo, so to speak, under him, and we went out for the intermission. And he said, you're going to be singing that part. I said, I'm not going to sing that Zerlina part. I don't want to be a peasant girl. And he said, no, no, the Donna Anna. And I was like, I could never sing that. It's too hard. Go
Wow,
figure. Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
he was a very, very wonderfully educated man. He in teaching me, I didn't realize, or I didn't know maybe, that I was his first private voice student. And he gave me a recording of Christa Ludwig singing the Kindertotenlieder. And he said, okay, he gave me the music, which I still have in my studio today. He gave it to me and he gave me this recording and said, I want you to sound like that. So, I mean, it could be worse imitating Crystal
I
Ludwig.
should say, well,
I mean, I was like, well, I can
you had a
sing.
really good first student, that's for sure.
I
That,
know, I
that'll
know.
launch a studio. And how interesting, Carol, that those two operas in a way would play out so importantly for you. One, that you heard Beverly Sills, who then was, an important connection at New York City
Oh,
Opera, and then
yes.
Donna, which became a signature role for you in that pairing of operas. It's just fascinating.
It's interesting. And not only was Beverly with the City Opera, she came into my existence as a singer when I was in the Met auditions.
Okay.
And I had lost. Giorgio Tozzi poured me a bunch of red wine. I was upset and blah, blah, blah. He slapped me on the back. You're an opera singer. You're not a contest winner. And I'm like, I would like to be a contest winner. Went back to the hotel and I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any work in coming up.
Right.
And I thought to myself that Mr. Adler, Kurt Adler in San Francisco, had been very kind during the Merrill program. And I called him up, drunk as a skunk, and said, "Mr. Adler, I don't know what I'm going to do. I know you've got a young artist program." And it's very hard for me even now to take bold steps. So where I got the chutzpah to do it, but I guess the wine,
In
vino
vino veritas,
Vino
absolutely.
Veritas. And basically, he called me back about 40 minutes later to tell me that Beverly Sills had gone to Atlantic Richfield, which had sponsored a lot of her telecasts, and got them to give the money for me to spend 2 to 3 years in San Francisco. So that's how she came into my life
Wow. I didn't
first.
realize that. I didn't realize that. How interesting.
It
Well,
was.
we'll get back to young artist programs and competitions in a second, but I'm always fascinated. And I remembered this, from years ago that your first teacher had you studying as a mezzo. Now you put it in air quotes, and he suggested you'd be singing Donna, which is not a mezzo soprano role. So how did that work out? Just exploring the middle bottom of your voice before finding the soprano in you.
Um, okay, so it really was the very top that I had issues with. And by the very top, I mean C, C sharp, D, which is as high as my voice ever went. Um, and it was funny because I always had middle voice. I used to sing like with a school kind of rock band,
Mhm.
and I played the guitar, and my middle voice was very much like my mother. Like you can hear my speaking voice is low.
Right.
My mother's voice was lower.
Mhm.
And so when my mom, whenever she would sing around the house, which she only did before I became a singer, after that she didn't want to sing around the house
Mhm.
anymore. I don't know why. But her voice was always very rich and warm in the middle. And I had no trouble with chest voice. It didn't even occur to me that there were people who didn't have it because, I had sung the Beatles songs and I could
Mhm.
belt out things in the bottom of my voice. So that part of my voice, once he got me into singing like the Mahler, for example, and I expressed some desire to maybe sing higher, he actually gave me Abschwelche
Mhm.
from Fidelio. He gave me Piangero la sorte mia
Okay.
of Giulio Cesare. And he gave me some things that were quite high, but he billed me as a mezzo. So I think, in effect, it was just everybody learning what kind of voice I was. It's my middle voice that I think has really served me in my life in the roles I wanted to go into, especially the roles that were on the heavier end.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I didn't really have to yell the middle, I could just sing it.
Right. Right.
Whereas a lot of girls have to pump it out when they get to Manon Lescaut, and which I consider to be a very heavy role. But for the top, when I got to the high C, once I got my breath under me, and I understood that you could sing a high C and not be scared to death.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, that's what happened with my first role, which was Tosca. That I thought, well, there's these four high C's and or three, four, and I wasn't afraid of them. I thought, well, I'm a mezzo anyway.
Hmm.
Although my new teacher said, you're not a mezzo. So in effect, I really didn't study as a mezzo with someone who
Yeah.
knew what to do for
Right.
mezzo.
Right.
Every contest I sang, even the one called the AEIOU contest,
I've
that I
never
won.
heard of that.
Of course you didn't, but I won $50. And the main thing, the comment with the judges, you're not a mezzo.
Wow. Wow. But when you're starting out to sing where your voice is a healthy thing to do.
Yes.
And I always remember because I worked for Beverly Sills for those 4 years,
Oh,
in the early
yeah.
80s, and she also had a low speaking voice. She had
Yes.
a very
Yes.
low speaking voice. So interesting. So the Met competition didn't pan out as you might have wished it to, perhaps for the better. Um, and you did your time. I didn't mean it that way. You worked at San Francisco Opera as a young artist.
I
Um,
did. I did. It was kind of a wild time while I was in San Francisco because I actually did a lot of roles, but I had a lot of issues with I got really sick. I started to catch um yeah, bronchitis, but laryngitis, and I would have strep throat, once every 2 months. And eventually that took a toll. And there came a time when I had been asked to come in and come to a brown bag rehearsal of Traviata, and we had just done Così the day before in
Hmm.
Geyser Peak Winery in 95-degree heat. And I, of course, was singing Fiordiligi. And I was sick as a dog, and I said, I can't come. And they said, you have to come. And being a young singer and not wanting to lose my job, I went down sick, and I just walked in. I said, I'm in a mark, blah, blah, blah. And apparently the woman who was directing got very pissed off at my marking and yelled at me and said, you're not a professional, and da da da. And this just goes to show how strong you have to be, because this woman said, I'm going to tell everyone, blah, 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 blah. And I just started singing then. We were doing the first act aria scene with the tenor. And I started singing, and I got up on like the second high C, and I felt bang in my voice, and I had hemorrhaged my right vocal cord.
Oh my word, I did not know this.
Oh yeah, it's kind of an old story. I've told it to people before, but I when that happened, Mr. Adler said, "Well, I'm not going to fire you." Because I needed the insurance to have my tonsils out so I could
Hmm.
stop getting sick. So, and the first thing I was going to do when I came back from this injury, which was in 2 months, was Julius Caesar in the
Yeah.
Spring Opera Theater.
Yeah.
And so I was scared shitless, of course. I recovered from my laryngitis. I went down to Southern California to my teacher, David Scott, and my doctor, who was Hans von Leyden, considered now the grandfather of otolaryngology.
Hmm.
And and he basically didn't say anything to me, but said, you must work slowly, slowly, slowly. And within the next month, my voice came back, inch by inch, but secure.
Hmm.
There, my teacher the first lesson I'll never forget. I was singing 3 notes, cracking on at least 2 of them. And, I was like, how is this ever going to? But he
Hmm.
was just stick to it. My first lesson was 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. But
Wow.
when I was done, I sang Julius Caesar to some of the greatest reviews. I mean, I even every now and then I go through all my stuff because I'm trying to clean things out in my basement, and I see these things and I'm going, yeah, but what they don't know behind this, review is, what was going on in reality in my head was sing healthy, sing healthy, sing healthy.
You went from San Francisco Opera in the training program into your career with almost no downtime.
Well,
Uh,
except, no, that first year, all I had on my docket were 3 performances of Clemenza di Tito.
mhm.
And then at the last minute, I either pulled out or got sick in Spoleto, USA, of the opera they were doing Il Marito Disperato and The Bells, Rachmaninoff. And I just I happened to be a very, very quick learner.
Mhm.
So in a weekend, I learned this opera. I mean, it's early Donizetti, so it's not the hardest thing you've ever learned, but you have to you have to
Yeah.
memorize. So
Yeah.
I got down there in 2 days, and so that I think we maybe had 4 performances, 5 maybe. I remember making something like $400 a week and feeling like I was rich. I had sold my car in San Francisco before I came to New York. So I had a little bit of money there and then 3 performances in Spoleto. And that was my first year. After
Wow.
after Clemenza, things started to move.
Right, right. And of course, Clemenza was your debut at City Opera as well. I was there, and
Oh, we were. Oh
I
my God.
was, and it has never been sung as well. Carol Vaness. It has
Oh,
never been sung as well.
well, thank you.
The great final Shayna.
Wonderful.
No one has sung it top to bottom the way you do. And when you were describing your uh, easy access to your chest voice, your middle, but then you had found the top notes, you are describing the final scene of, Vitellia in Clemenza di Tito.
Yes, it's frustrating for a lot of sopranos when they look at the role, because when, like most, that aria used to be in the mezzo anthology.
Yes, yes.
I mean, a lot of people think, well, it's a mezzo aria. Well, a mezzo can sing it, but when, for example, I jumped into a Clemenza at Covent Garden when I had arrived for Glyndebourne, and it was Yvonne Minton or Janet Baker. One of the two of them had canceled, but both were mezzos.
Yep.
And,
I first learned it with Janet Baker. Yep.
and they explained to me that if I wanted to sing the high notes at the end of that 1.5 minute trio,
Mm-hmm.
that I could, but that they had not been singing it. And I'm going, how can you not sing it? It's written right there. So anyway, so I could do that, I mean, it's so short to show your top, but it still was fun. I actually I got to the point where I did like Clemenza. When I first started, I absolutely detested it. I said, this is cheap Mozart. Just as stupid as a soprano can be. This is cheap Mozart.
I love the duet in the first act. It's just such beautiful music.
Oh yeah, it is. It's beautiful.
Oh, how funny. So, there you were making your debut at City Opera, Vitellia. And I've asked a number of people this, because now that it doesn't exist any longer, what was it like to be a young artist at the start of your career at New York City Opera? What was the City Opera experience like?
It was, in a bizarre way, like frantic comfort, insane comfort. Everything that went on there was not unheard of. That, oh, you're here today, you want to sing? Like when I got sick during Traviata,
Mm-hmm.
Ashley Putnam was
I was there.
and you were there. Oh my God, you were there too. Okay, well, and I was sick, and I'm like, I had worked so hard to get that far that I was just telling myself, you're not sick, you're fine. You're not sick, you're fine. But I had a temperature of 101, and I'm sitting backstage. Beverly walked out after I walked off, she came back, of course, and walked out, and Ashley standing there. She said, you want to be a hero? And God bless Ashley. They put her in the costume and pushed her out. The person I felt the saddest for was John Garrison, because he had gone to warm up a little bit before the thing in Sempre Libera.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that when he came back out, he thought he had missed it. He said it was totally silent, going, oh no, I've missed the end of Act One.
That's funny. I didn't know that piece.
Oh, goodness.
And I remember Ashley saying, Beverly, I don't know this production. And Beverly saying, Ashley, it's Act 2 of Traviata. What else do you need to know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, in effect, I mean, you can futz around with it. But now, with all the experience I've had in my life, I could tell people, and they might be shocked, that I arrive in Vienna to do 3 or 4 Toscas with Juan Pons and Marcello Giordani. And we didn't rehearse the staging. We just talked and, did a couple of points where their supers were going to come in,
Mm-hmm.
and we just settled on the Met production. I said, so what are we doing here? Marcello looks at me and goes, how about we do the Met production? I'm going, okay, let's do the Met.
Wow. But, without, because you didn't go, participate in, first the Glimmerglass Young Artist Program and then the Santa Fe Young Artist Program. You again went from sort of high intensity San Francisco training right into your career. Did you have a natural inclination to the stage? Did you just sort of develop your skill set as you went along? How did that work for you?
Good question. I think I learned a lot at every time I worked. I spent a great deal of time studying my own movement in a mirror, so I could be sure that if it was going to be this or that. By the time I got to Julius Caesar in San Francisco, I started to get a clue about some types of acting, some stylized, some not. And then I was the the kids' performances of Mimi in the Penel Bohème that
Okay.
that year that they did it with Koterbach and Aragal and Remy. And I was, I mean, I did that Mimi, and by the time I started to do those things, I was getting it. I never found Clemenza difficult to act because she's so
Hmm.
I could just be mean until I felt sorry for myself, in
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe it came naturally to me. I feel like I've always kind of had well, like every singer, a kind of dramatic flair when I need it. I'm
Hmm.
very outgoing, as you know, and I'm not ashamed to copy something I see someone doing that is really excellent.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of singers say, oh, but I want to develop my own character. And I'm going, well, okay, but unless you're in a festival situation, Glyndebourne came early for me too.
Right.
So Glyndebourne, I mean, working in Glyndebourne, just doing everything so much, all that time working on recitatives, the meaning, the movement, the this, the that, all of those things were amazing training for me. And I know you can't recommend Glyndebourne to everybody,
Right.
but that kind of festival situation, if young singers could take how look at what it really takes to study. That doesn't mean just learn the words. It
Hmm.
means learn the words and get the idea of how they're going to feel in your mouth and the color of emotion you want to make with that word. And I think that that kind of work is what I encourage people in my
Hmm.
studio
Hmm.
to do because it's not just about the perfect ah vowel. Having a good ah vowel is great, but ah changes per language, so you have to
Hmm.
be flexible. I think probably it has always served me that if I needed to swivel on a dime, I could do it. I could change.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Julius Caesar, Handel. We've talked about, you mentioned Così, Clemenza. I was at the opening of your Alcina at City Opera,
Oh, oh,
the Benny Montresor production.
I loved it.
That production was so good.
It was incredible. And I mean, well, Andre Serban is quite
Yes.
he's quite a personality. I adored him. But Cuckoo, yes, in all the good senses of the word, not afraid. Well, although he did come in and say, why do we have to do all these repeats? Let's cut all the repeats, and Raymond Lepart's going, no, I don't think so,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It was
So,
just incredible. So, but here's Handel and Mozart. Of course, you sang Verdi. I remember your Vespri Siciliani and all your Puccini. But the core in the early part of your career was Handel and Mozart.
yes.
And was that music, or were those characters that spoke to you in a particular way? Was your voice just particularly well suited to that repertoire? You and Handel and Mozart. Well, what was that relationship about?
Okay. Well, when I did my first Donna Anna, which is as a grad student, um, I chose that role because my teacher had given me the option of choosing one of the female roles in Giovanni, so I chose Anna. And as I was looking at it, I tried to imagine myself, you know, acting. Mozart, at that point, it was very high for me, but they had just started all those television things, with Luciano and Renata and et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, I want to look good on television.
Hmm.
And so when I worked, I would work in a mirror to make sure that I could act that way, especially with Mozart, because having to balance my voice on what I call my F, on balancing on the F, the
Hmm.
upper F. Um, some people do it, but you can see they're uncomfortable. I was determined for it to not only sound good, but look good. And so for me, once I started to get the idea of that, this is a balance. And if I can keep this balance with ah, then I have to find the position for a, o, oo. Oo, of course, being very easy to find most of the time for me because of the head voice. And so I pretty much felt like whenever I was doing Mozart, I was intrigued to find new things, because it's got so much in it that the more you look for it, you find one thing, and then you see revealed a couple more things. Oh, but what about that? What if I go for that vowel?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
how does this balance? Does this look okay? Do I look like I'm screaming? How am I going to do Doreste Diace, which I learned how to do that through the Pinnell production
Mm-hmm.
because of all that bent over stuff and
Yep.
staying once you've sung doing all that movement, all you have to do is get your voice in the same position without doing this. And that for me is what I worked on the entire beginning of my career.
Yeah.
Handel, I never felt like I was a fluty, light, Handelian singer. Although I did hear um, someone had posted a thing of me singing Alcina in Paris on the radio. And my voice is very clean and bright. I wouldn't say light, but I wouldn't say heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I've always sung into Handel.
You know,
Mozart,
and only, more recently have those roles been taken by lighter singers. And
yes.
when we grew up, you had full-throated singers singing Handel.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And but of course that would mean you'd have to take time.
Mm-hmm.
If you hadn't already, that would mean you'd have to take time out of your schedule to work on flexibility and work on the clarity of your coloratura and the style of coloratura, because there are some arias that have a bunch of staccati, there's some that are all connected, and there's some you have to work out so that it sounds the most beautiful it can sound.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
You began to answer a question that I had, because there are some singers who sing, 300 roles, once. And then there are some singers who have a smaller repertoire, but they live with the roles, live with Fiordiligi, Donna, Tosca. Um, and you're one of those. You lived with your repertoire.
a
What
lot of
was
it,
it?
yeah.
How did you keep it fresh for yourself to sing Donna or Fiordiligi or Tosca so many times, so many different productions?
Well, I didn't have to work hard to make it interesting to me, because basically I found there's so much depth in libretti, in the Da Ponte, for example. There's so much depth in the words. And again, when something is technically not the easiest thing you've ever done, like Per Pietà, which goes back and forth, low, 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 and then a
Mm-hmm.
high B, high B's at the end, that's a very different style too, especially from the rest of the roll of Fiordiligi,
Yeah,
which sits high.
yeah.
You're on the top of every darn ensemble going, okay, get down now, I'm tired, it's enough for me. But how I stayed interested, I didn't even have to work to be interested. I was interested. When I did Tosca, my first Tosca is the recording with Muti.
Mm,
That's the first Tosca that I got paid. The other was an
interesting.
undergrad. I was
Interesting.
21. So, and basically, he taught me how to look at the score. Just look at it. Because there are a lot of people, like I tell students, and they're singing this aria, and they're singing really loud, or they're singing really soft, and I'm looking at this score and I say, well, can you tell me what this means here, this marking? And there'll be a marking, I know, spirituoso, or I can't think of anything right off,
Yeah.
but and they'll say, oh, no, and then I'll say, okay, well, it's important that not only do you translate, but you look at all these markings. Puccini's Tosca, he tells you exactly what to do in each bar.
Mhm.
There's not a bar that's the same. All the markings, and it gives you some insight into the depth of the character. It's not just loud. VC Darte's not just soft.
Mhm.
It's not all fast. It's not all slow. It rolls with a certain, and Bohème is even more complicated
Mhm.
because you have even more people,
Okay.
singing together. And so, I mean, for me, I get excited when I think about a score and getting to see whatever is in there.
Hmm.
And Mozart too. But there are times when I wish Mozart would have made even more. But I was given a gift by a dear friend of the Mozart, the operas, the facsimiles.
Hmm.
So I have all the facsimiles. So whenever somebody says, I don't know, is this is the Bärenreiter? I'm going, yeah, well, the Bärenreiter had 3 publishings of this, and 2 of them are totally different. Well, I said, now go, let's look it up in the real score. So
Wow.
we look it up, and aha, first one was right. Second one corrected wrong.
What a great resource. What a great resource. Go back to the
It's very
score.
cool and very, very interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
Not
Um,
like reading, however.
the role models. We've invoked many names here. Did you have either that you knew them and talked to them, or just didn't know them but thought about what they did? Did you have role models in your career?
Um, I would say Beverly, we didn't sing the same rep, but I loved how she dealt with people.
Hmm.
Of course, I loved how she sang. I couldn't sing like that. Um, in terms of other role models, believe it or not, it's kind of strange, but Luciano.
Really?
And Luciano, because when I was close to him, it was like a voice lesson every time. I watched how he husbanded his resources as he got older because I got him mid and late.
Hmm.
And I just, the quality that he would give every single night was incredibly inspiring to me. It wasn't, I mean, I feel like it's nice if you're the kind of thing comes in and you have one great night. But when you come in and you can give a great night that's not the same, night after night after night, that's when you become a star,
Hmm.
I think. Because, I mean, it's something, his work ethic. Maybe he wasn't always that good with learning notes, but he worked very hard at what he had.
Hmm.
Um, Otherwise, did I have other role models? I used to go, when I was trying to learn to act more myself, I would go and I bought front row tickets to Diane Soviero's Traviata.
Ah.
So that, and I 100% credit my 4th act to her because I watched how she walked and I went every night. And of course, we didn't have these things, where we
Hmm.
could video it. So, it wasn't on video. I was going to watch it. And it was amazing, amazing. And so I used that so as a tool.
Yeah, a wonderful singer, Diana. Wonderful singer.
Yes. Oh, and a great colleague and a
Yes.
great person.
Yes.
Yeah, loved her too.
Absolutely, and absolutely true. Um, and she was another one of those great American singers. At the time, whether it was John Rolandi or June Anderson or Johanna Meyer, Dinah Soviera, and there was this cluster of you that who were just phenomenal artists. And of course, had that start at New York City Opera, where you kind
Yes.
of arrived and sang anything.
Well, you actually felt a great deal of support from your colleagues there. I mean, the room where everybody sat to take a break had machines in it and had a couple of beat up couches, and we'd all just get in there and blah, 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 and then go back to work.
Yeah, yeah, the canteen downstairs,
I know
absolutely.
it's funny, huh?
Um, and in a way, you've answered some of this already, because I was going to ask you about the introduction of cameras into the opera world. You said, early on in the late 70s, when things were starting to be on TV, you thought to yourself, I want to look good. Um, but you also spoke about watching yourself in the mirror and thinking about, how does this look? So in a way, you prepared yourself for life with a camera.
Yes.
um, do you work hard with your students to think about, okay, doing this on stage, doing it on camera? Is camera a part of what you teach now?
Basically, kind of, in that have cell phone, $14 tripod. Take it, record yourself how you look when you sing. much better actually if you have the guts to look at yourself,
Hmm.
because some people don't. They don't want to know. I don't want to look at. Well, you have a look because it's important. Your technique can be seen on your face,
Hmm.
and so I basically make sure that when people leave my studio, that I've made them pay attention to what they do physically. Like I have a baritone who is like this, and
Hmm.
by the time we're done with his lesson, he's walking like this. And I said, "That's all very well and good, but you've got to do that while you're singing, and I
Hmm.
can't tell you every time.
Hmm.
You're going to have to work on that." And it's the singers that go and work on those things that are more often than not the successes,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they're willing to look at stuff that they don't like.
Yep.
And sometimes you can be surprised. And, like years after I've sung something and I think, ugh, that was terrible, I'm not listening to that. And I go back and listen and go, hey, it wasn't half bad, half bad compared.
Did the presence of cameras change your performance at all, or was it all the same to you?
Well, no, it's a little bit different because the ones at the Met, basically the big gala is there's nothing you can do. You just come, you sing, you go, as best you can.
Yeah.
I wish someone had told me that I should have more facial expressions in the final trio from Faust, which is put on with me and Jim and Jerry Hadley. And I look at him going, I look like I'm going, okay, here I am. I wish I had a taco. I don't know what's going it looks, but so the thing with the other ones, with the Giovanni and with the Così especially, is that we had certain places where they asked us to please look,
Okay.
please play this side, because they actually covered the lights
All right.
so that we weren't, because I don't know, just looking out and seeing the camera lights, the little red lights, that always made me a little bit nervous. But once you got into it, and it's not hard to, instead of reaching for the tenor with my downstage hand, reach with my upstage hand. That's not hard.
Hmm.
That's just adjustment. So the thing that it doesn't change is my singing
Right.
at all. It
Right.
doesn't change the singing, but it can change some of the physicality.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
nowadays they're right down people's throats, and that's good for some people and not good for other people.
Right.
So that's the danger of that.
Yeah. It's just become such a part of what we do, especially in this era of COVID, post-COVID, where suddenly everyone was producing things on camera.
Oh yeah,
A
totally.
revolution. So there you are in Bloomington, Indiana,
Hmm.
and you have a career of experience. You're working with young people. Do you find that frustrating, energizing? How is it working with youngsters who are so, green behind the ears?
Okay, so here's the thing. I just directed Tosca in Kansas City
You
with the
directed it. I didn't know. I didn't know you were.
uh-huh.
That's
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yes, very good cast. Marina Costa Jackson, Michael Mays, and Dimitri Pitas.
Okay.
So a good experienced cast. Her first Tosca. The difference between doing that and what I do is that when I ask them to do something, the experienced people, they do it. And they do it with intent. And they don't just go, okay, I'm left, now what? With students, if I'm directing in my opera workshop, for example, I can give them directions, but what I try to do is I try to get them to think independently of what I tell them.
Hmm.
But since I know when I graduated, all I wanted to do, what wanted a stage director to tell me was, do you want me to go left or right? And so the difference is I have to not only tell them left and right, I have to show them the different ways that left and right can work and why one works over the other one. Vocally, it's very, very interesting to help someone and to see the progress. It's always fascinating that over the summers, I tell people do this, 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 and I give them a whole little set of things. And the ones that do those little things come back steps ahead of
Hmm.
everybody else
Hmm.
because they've done what comes next. sometimes it's just hard to explain. The frustrating thing is school has schoolwork,
Yeah.
and opera and voice lessons and coachings are really the preparation. Now, of course, only between 1 and 2% of the people in the schools nowadays are going to be working singers.
Yes.
And I have to say, I have a better percentage of that from people from my studio. Thank heavens for them. But there are people who stop or do something else, and do very well. So it's more, I would say the first couple of weeks are more frustrating than as the semester goes on, and I can see people getting things. I give them something, this, you have to, I don't care what you do with the rest of it for right now, come back with this. Because I'm pretty specific.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Professor Vaness, I'd really like to have a career. I've wanted to do it since I was a kid. What advice do you have for me about having a career?
My advice is to listen to the great singers of the past. And I don't mean those who just recorded 20 years ago. I don't even mean me, but you could listen to me. I'm famous at least for Mozart. And practice, practice, and then practice more. Look for the meaning in the words, find the words, and be patient and kind to yourself. Don't negative speak. Do not think, well, that was shit.
Mm-hmm.
And if it starts to come out of your head, your mind, then you think, okay, well, let me just do that one more time to see if I can walk out of here with a better thought in my head than that was shit. And yeah, mostly practice and paying attention to what that character, if there is a character, and even in songs, there's kind of a character, most of them. It's finding that and allowing it in so you can make it part of you. It's not just enough to set it on top of you as like a garment. You have to take it in. That kind of music and understanding of libretto, that has to be taken into your heart and eventually will be part of your soul. And that's how you reach people. Is because then once you've got that and an audience wants to hear it, you can share. And once you share that to an audience, the payback in that exchange is gigantic. It's a drug. It's the best drug in the world when you're singing and giving and they give back to you. And I don't mean applause either. You can really hear it when they're with you.
Yep.
And I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
Yeah, I am too. I am too.
Because it's very, very, it's very moving, exciting, kind of more moving, transformational.
Yeah, magical when that happens.
Indeed.
Wow, that's just phenomenal advice. Carol Vaness, thank you for spending this time.
You're welcome. It's a great joy.
It's just great to talk to you and to hear your stories and words of wisdom. Let's wait until COVID makes it safe for us to just go out. And
I love it.
I owe you a dinner. I'll come to Bloomington. This has just been wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much.
You have a good rest of day, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks. You.
Yep, bye-bye.